Jake raises his camera at Angel's Point overlook, the California sunset painting the canyon in gold. Through the viewfinder, he sees himself falling, arms flailing, terror frozen on his face. The vision lasts 3 seconds. His hands tremble as he lowers the camera. The cliff edge suddenly feels too close, the wind too strong. "Did you get the shot?" Sarah asks. Jake stares at the empty frame on his camera screen, his reflection nowhere to be found. The morning air at Angel's Point carried the scent of pine and distant wildfire smoke. Jake adjusted his tripod for the 100th time, the metal legs scraping against the weathered granite. The overlook stretched before him like a stone altar, offering a panoramic view of the San Gabriel Valley. Below, a patchwork of suburban sprawl and desert mountains bathed in golden morning light. "Babe, you've been at this for 2 hours," Sarah said, checking her phone. Her breath formed small clouds in the crisp mountain air. The lighting was perfect an hour ago. Jake wiped sweat from his forehead, despite the cool temperature. Since yesterday's vision, every approach to the cliff edge felt like walking toward his own grave. The image haunted him, his body tumbling through empty air. Face twisted in terror, arms reaching for something that wasn't there. "Something's not right about this spot," he muttered, repositioning the camera again. The viewfinder felt heavy in his hands, like it was pulling him forward. "You said that yesterday, too." Sarah's voice carried a hint of irritation. "We've got 3 more locations to hit before sunset." Jake forced a laugh. You know me, perfectionist to the core. But his followers expected content, and Angel's Point was Instagram gold. The jutting rock formation created a natural platform suspended 800 feet above the valley, perfect for those death-defying shots that drove engagement through the roof. Tom Bradley emerged from the hiking trail, his park ranger uniform crisp despite the early hour. His weathered face carried the kind of deep lines that spoke of too many years spent outdoors and too many difficult conversations. "Morning, folks," Tom nodded, but his eyes lingered on Jake's setup near the cliff edge. "Beautiful day for photography." "Absolutely," Jake replied, forcing enthusiasm into his voice. "This place is incredible. Must be popular with photographers." Tom's expression darkened slightly. "More popular than it should be, maybe. Had 3 incidents here this year alone. People get so focused on the perfect shot, they forget where they are." The words hit Jake like ice water. "Incidents?" "Accidents," Tom clarified, but something in his tone suggested otherwise. "Folks lean too far, trust equipment too much, get distracted by the view. This granite can be slippery, especially when the morning dew settles." Jake glanced at his feet. The rock surface looked solid, but now he noticed a subtle sheen of moisture, the way his hiking boots seemed to slide just slightly with each step. "Well, we're being careful," Sarah interjected. "Jake's been doing this for years." Tom studied Jake's face. "You look like you've seen something that bothered you, son." The question hung in the air like the morning mist. Jake wanted to tell him about the vision, about the inexplicable certainty that this place would be his end. Instead, he shrugged. "Just tired. Long drive up here." But as Tom walked away, Jake caught him glancing back with an expression that seemed almost knowing, as if he'd heard this conversation before, with other photographers who came seeking the perfect shot at Angel's Point. The wind picked up, carrying the distant sound of traffic from the valley below. Jake raised his camera again, hands trembling despite his efforts to stay calm. Through the lens, the view was breathtaking, but somewhere in the back of his mind, he couldn't shake the feeling that the cliff was watching him back. Jake stepped back from the cliff edge, his heart hammering against his ribs. The vision from yesterday played on repeat in his mind, that split second of seeing himself falling. The way his future self's eyes had met his own through the camera lens with pure, unfiltered terror. "Let's try a different angle," he announced, his voice steadier than he felt. "Maybe from over there, near those boulders." Sarah raised an eyebrow. Since when do you settle for different angles? You always go for the money shot. The money shot. Jake's signature move was getting as close to the edge as physically possible, creating that heart-stopping perspective that made followers feel like they were suspended in midair. But this felt different. This felt like a trap. Jake moved his equipment to a cluster of granite boulders about 15 feet back from the main overlook. The angle was still dramatic, but safer, much safer. He set up his tripod and adjusted the camera settings, trying to ignore how his hands still shook. "The composition's not as strong from here," Sarah observed, peering over his shoulder at the camera's LCD screen. "You can't see the full drop-off. It looks like just another mountain photo." She was right. From this position, Angel's Point looked tame, domesticated. His followers craved danger, the vicarious thrill of living on the edge. A safe photo would disappoint them, maybe even cost him sponsorship deals. His mind flashed to the mortgage payment due next week, the equipment loans, the lifestyle that required constant content creation. "Maybe just a few steps closer," Sarah suggested. "You don't have to go all the way to the edge." Jake's stomach clenched. Even thinking about moving closer made his vision blur. But the rational part of his mind, the part that had built his career on calculated risks, argued with his fear. The vision was probably just anxiety, pre-performance nerves manifesting as a weird hallucination. He took a tentative step toward the cliff, then another. The wind seemed to intensify, tugging at his jacket with invisible fingers. Below, a red-tailed hawk circled lazily, riding the thermal currents that rose from the sun-warmed valley floor. Jake had always found something peaceful about hawks, but now the bird's presence felt ominous, like it was waiting for something to fall. "That's better," Sarah said as Jake repositioned the tripod. "The depth is starting to come through." Jake raised the camera to his eye and immediately felt dizzy. Through the viewfinder, the cliff edge seemed to pulse, drawing him forward like a magnet. He blinked hard and lowered the camera. When he looked again, everything appeared normal, just rock and sky and the vast drop beyond. "You okay?" Sarah touched his arm. "You look pale." "Fine. Just need some water." Jake took a long drink from his hydration pack, the cool liquid doing little to settle his nerves. In the distance, he could see Tom Bradley making his rounds, checking on other visitors to the overlook. There was a young couple taking selfies near the safety railing, a solo hiker eating a granola bar on a bench, an older man with expensive camera equipment who seemed to be waiting for better light. All of them looked so normal, so untroubled by the proximity to death. Why was he the only one who could feel it? The weight of gravity, the hunger of the void. Jake tried 3 more shots from the safer position, but each frame looked wrong through the lens. The perspective was flat, uninspiring. His followers would scroll past without stopping, without engaging. The algorithm would punish him for low performance, pushing his content further down in people's feeds. "One more try," he muttered, taking another step forward. "Just one shot from the real edge." "Jake," Sarah's voice carried a warning. "You're acting weird. Maybe we should come back tomorrow when you're feeling better." But tomorrow wouldn't change anything. The vision would still be there, waiting. The fear would still gnaw at him. And his rent would still be due. Jake shouldered his camera bag and walked toward the cliff edge, each step feeling like he was walking toward his own execution. The morning sun had burned off most of the dew, but the granite still felt treacherous under his feet. Behind him, Sarah's worried voice seemed to fade into the white noise of wind and distant traffic. At the very edge of Angel's Point, Jake set up his tripod one final time. Through the camera lens, the world looked different, sharper, more alive, but also more dangerous. He could feel the pull of gravity, stronger here than anywhere else, as if the earth itself wanted to drag him down into the waiting void. The drive down the winding mountain road should have felt like freedom, but Jake's hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles had gone white. In the passenger seat, Sarah scrolled through the morning shots on his camera, her face illuminated by the LCD screen. "These are actually really good," she said, pausing on a wide shot taken from the boulder cluster. "Different from your usual style, but there's something haunting about them. More artistic." Jake barely heard her. His mind was already 3 steps ahead, planning their escape from California entirely. They could catch a red-eye flight tonight, be back in Austin by morning. He'd make up some excuse about a family emergency, or say he got food poisoning. Anything to get away from Angel's Point and the vision that refused to fade. But as they reached the bottom of the mountain and pulled into a gas station, Jake's phone erupted with notifications. The morning's posts were going viral, not the safe shots from the boulders, but the few images he'd managed to capture from the cliff edge before panic overwhelmed him. The engagement was insane. Thousands of likes per minute, comments flooding in, new followers by the hundreds. "Holy shit," Sarah breathed, looking at his phone. "Look at this one comment. When are you going back for the sunset shot?" "It is like 2,000 likes already." Jake's stomach dropped. The sunset shot was Angel's Point Photography 101. Every serious landscape photographer who visited had to capture the way the evening light painted the canyon walls in brilliant orange and red, with the photographer silhouetted against the vast sky. It was the shot his followers expected, the shot that would cement this location in his portfolio. "We're not going back," he said firmly, pulling away from the gas pump. "But Jake, this is blowing up. Your biggest post this month, maybe this year. People are going crazy for Angel's Point content." As if summoned by her words, Jake's phone rang. The caller ID showed Marcus Chun, his agent and brand manager. "Congrats, superstar," Marcus's voice boomed through the car speakers. "Angel's Point is trending. I've got 3 companies asking about partnership deals based on this morning's content alone. But I need you to strike while the iron's hot sunset shots, maybe some video content. This could be the campaign that gets you to 3 million followers." 3 million. Jake had been chasing that number for 2 years. It represented the difference between influencer and celebrity, between scraping by and genuine financial security. Brands paid exponentially more once you crossed certain follower thresholds. "I don't know, Marcus. Something feels off about that place." "Off how?" "The engagement metrics are through the roof. Your audience retention is the highest it's been in months. Whatever you're feeling, channel it into the content. Authentic emotion sells." Sarah was watching Jake's face carefully. She'd seen him wrestle with difficult decisions before, watched him weigh artistic vision against commercial success. But this was different. This was fear, plain and simple, and Jake had never been afraid of anything in his career. After ending the call, they sat in the gas station parking lot as traffic rushed by on the interstate. The ordinary world felt surreal after the morning's experience: soccer moms in SUVs, truckers grabbing coffee, teenagers on skateboards. None of them had visions of their own death. None of them woke up knowing exactly where and how they might die. "What did you see up there?" Sarah asked quietly. "And don't say nothing. You've been acting strange since yesterday." Jake considered lying, but Sarah had been with him for 3 years. She could read him better than anyone. "I saw myself falling," he admitted. Through the camera viewfinder, like a preview of what was going to happen. It felt more real than real, if that makes sense. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "Like a premonition?" "I guess. I know it sounds crazy." "It does sound crazy," she agreed. "But you've always had good instincts about dangerous situations. Remember that glacier in Iceland? You called off the shoot 20 minutes before that ice shelf collapsed." Jake remembered. His followers had called him paranoid, but the local guides later said his caution probably saved their lives. "So, what do we do?" Sarah asked. Jake started the engine. "We go home, tonight. I'll post the morning shots and call it good." Let someone else get the sunset at Angel's Point. But even as he said it, Jake knew it wouldn't be that simple. The vision had been too specific, too detailed. He'd seen himself in the same clothes he was wearing now, with the same camera equipment, at the exact time when the sunset light would be perfect. It wasn't just a warning, it was an appointment with destiny. As they merged onto the interstate heading toward Los Angeles, Jake tried to convince himself that distance would break whatever hold Angel's Point had on him. But in his peripheral vision, the mountains seemed to follow their progress, and the afternoon sun was already beginning its slow descent toward the horizon. By evening, he'd be back. He could feel it with the same certainty that he'd felt the vision. Some appointments, it seemed, couldn't be canceled. The hotel room in Burbank felt like a prison cell. Jake paced between the beds, his phone buzzing constantly with notifications, interview requests, and collaboration offers. The Angel's Point photos had exploded across social media, reposted by major photography accounts, featured in travel blogs, shared by celebrities with millions of followers. "Look at this," Sarah said, holding up her laptop. "National Geographic's Instagram just shared your photo. That's like the holy grail for landscape photographers." Jake barely glanced at the screen. Outside their hotel window, the Los Angeles skyline glittered in the late afternoon sun, but his eyes kept drifting to the mountains in the distance. Angel's Point was up there somewhere, waiting for his return like a patient predator. His phone rang again. This time, it was Rebecca Torres from Adventure Gear Company, one of his biggest sponsors. "Jake, incredible work today. Our sales team is going crazy. Your Angel's Point post has driven more traffic to our website than any campaign this quarter. We want to talk about expanding your contract, maybe getting you some signature products." "That's great, Rebecca, but there's a sunset shoot happening tonight, right? Please tell me you're planning sunset content. Our engagement team has a whole campaign ready to launch around it." The call ended before Jake could explain that he was 50 miles away with no intention of returning. But as the afternoon wore on, the pressure mounted. Marcus called 3 more times. Sarah's Instagram DM is filled with messages from followers begging for sunset shots. Even Jake's mother texted, saying she'd seen his photos shared on Facebook by relatives he'd forgotten he had. "Maybe we could find a different sunset location," Sarah suggested. "Malibu has some great cliffs, or we could drive up to Big Sur." But Jake knew it wouldn't be the same. His followers wanted Angel's Point specifically. They wanted the exact view he'd captured that morning, enhanced by the golden hour light that turned California canyons into something magical. At 4 p.m., Jake made a decision that felt like stepping off a ledge. "We're going back." Sarah looked up from her laptop. "What?" "One sunset shot. We get in, get the photo, get out. 15 minutes max." "Jake, you were terrified this morning. You said you saw yourself falling. And maybe that's exactly why I need to go back. To prove it was just anxiety, just my mind playing tricks." Jake was already packing his camera gear, moving with the mechanical efficiency that came from years of professional shoots. "I can't let fear control my career. Besides, now that I know about the vision, I'll be extra careful." The drive back up into the San Gabriel Mountains felt like ascending toward his own execution. With each mile, the weight in Jake's chest grew heavier. Sarah tried to lighten the mood with music and conversation, but her efforts felt forced, desperate. They arrived at Angel's Point just as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon. The parking area was fuller now. Other photographers had arrived for sunset, drawn by the same Instagram posts that had made Jake's morning shots go viral. He recognized some of the equipment, the telltale signs of serious photographers: carbon fiber tripods, expensive telephoto lenses, the focused intensity of people chasing perfect light. Tom Bradley was still on duty, checking permits and chatting with visitors. When he saw Jake, his expression tightened. "Back for more?" Tom asked, but his tone suggested he wasn't entirely pleased to see them. "Just one sunset shot," Jake replied, surprised by how normal his voice sounded. "The morning photos did really well online. I saw. You've started quite a trend." Tom gestured toward the other photographers. "3 more shoots scheduled for tomorrow based on your posts. Everyone wants the Angels Point shot now." Something in the ranger's voice made Jake pause. "Is that a problem?" Tom was quiet for a moment, studying Jake's face. "This place has a history, son. Beautiful as it is, Angels Point has claimed its share of lives over the years. Sometimes I think it attracts the wrong kind of attention. Draws people who are so focused on the perfect image that they forget the basic rules of safety." "Well, be careful," Sarah interjected, but her voice lacked conviction. As they walked toward the overlook, Jake noticed details he'd missed that morning. Weathered memorial plaques bolted to boulders near the trail. Faded flowers tied to the safety railing. A small shrine of stones and crystals left by someone who had lost someone here. Angels Point wasn't just a scenic overlook. It was a graveyard disguised as an Instagram hotspot. The setup process felt like a ritual now. Jake positioned his tripod at the exact spot where he'd experienced a vision, each movement deliberate and careful. Other photographers worked around him, but they seemed distant, unreal, like actors in a play he was watching rather than participating in. As the sun dropped lower, the light began to change. The harsh afternoon brightness softened into the golden hour that every photographer lived for. Jake raised his camera and looked through the viewfinder. The vision hit him immediately, stronger this time, more detailed. He saw himself taking the shot. Saw the moment when he'd leaned just slightly too far forward to capture the perfect angle. He saw the granite give way under his foot, felt the sickening lurch as gravity claimed him. But he also saw the shot itself, and it was magnificent. The kind of image that would define his career, the photograph that would be remembered long after he was gone. Jake's finger hovered over the shutter button as the sun painted Angels Point in liquid gold, and he realized with perfect clarity that he was about to make the most important decision of his life. The golden hour light transformed Angels Point into something otherworldly. Jake watched through his viewfinder as the canyon walls caught fire with reflected sunlight, painting the rock faces in brilliant oranges and deep purples. Around him, other photographers worked frantically to capture the perfect moment, but their voices seemed to fade into background noise. All Jake could hear was the wind and his own heartbeat. "The light's incredible," Sarah whispered, standing behind him. "I've never seen anything like it." Jake adjusted his settings, his muscle memory taking over while his conscious mind wrestled with the vision. Every instinct told him to step back, to take the safe shot from a distance. But the perfect composition, the one that would make this image legendary, required him to position himself at the very edge of the cliff. Through the viewfinder, he could see other photographers in the distance, silhouetted against the golden sky. But they were too far away. Their shots would lack the dramatic perspective that made Angels Point special. To capture the true essence of this place, to show his followers what it really felt like to stand suspended between earth and sky, he needed to get closer. Jake took a step forward. The granite felt solid under his hiking boots, but he remembered Tom's warning about morning dew. Was the rock surface still slick? In the changing light, it was impossible to tell. "Maybe that's close enough," Sarah said, her voice tight with worry. But Jake could see the shot now, could visualize exactly how it would look. The setting sun would create a natural spotlight, illuminating him as a dark figure against the blazing sky. The canyon would stretch endlessly below, creating that vertiginous sense of scale that made viewers feel like they were falling into the image. It would be the shot that defined his career. The photograph that would be featured in galleries, printed in magazines, remembered long after he was gone. Jake raised the camera to his eye and immediately felt the familiar tug of the vision. But this time, instead of fighting it, he studied it. He watched himself lean forward for the perfect angle, saw the moment when his left foot would slip on a patch of lichen-covered granite. He observed his future self's desperate grab for the tripod, the way the expensive equipment would tumble into the void alongside his body. The vision was so detailed he could count the seconds, 12 of them, from the slip to the final impact 800 feet below. But he also saw something else, the shot itself, captured in the instant before the fall. A perfect image, technically flawless and emotionally devastating. The kind of photograph that would go viral not just for its beauty, but for the tragedy behind it. The last image taken by Jake Morrison, the travel photographer who died getting the perfect shot. His followers would share it millions of times. News outlets would run stories about the dangers of extreme photography. Other influencers would make tribute videos. His account would gain followers even in death, his final post becoming a digital monument to his obsession with the perfect image. Jake. Sarah's voice seemed to come from very far away. You're scaring me. Step back from the edge. Time seemed to slow as Jake made his choice. He could step back now, take the safe shot, live to photograph another day. His career would continue, solid but unremarkable. He'd gain followers gradually, work with decent brands, maybe eventually afford that house in Austin he and Sarah had talked about. Or he could take one more step forward and capture immortality. The sun was almost touching the horizon now, painting the entire canyon in liquid gold. This was the moment, the exact light, the perfect angle, the shot that would define not just his career, but his entire existence. Jake's finger found the shutter button. Through the viewfinder, he could see his own reflection in a puddle of water on the granite ledge. And for a split second, that reflection seemed to be falling. Other photographers called out their admiration for the light, for the incredible sunset they were all witnessing. Car doors slammed in the parking area as visitors arrived too late for the best shots. A red-tailed hawk circled below them, riding the thermals that rose from the sun-warmed canyon floor. Normal sounds of a normal evening at one of California's most beautiful overlooks. Jake leaned forward for the perfect angle and felt the granite shift slightly under his left foot. The shutter clicked. Behind him, Sarah screamed.